I'm excited to get started. This is great. We have an amazing group of people who've joined us today to get more information on the executive orders and the things that are happening with the administration, most importantly, how they're impacting nonprofits. So we have an exciting group around this table. This is a first. We've got a great studio and a number of people online to have some good conversation. We did say we were going to keep it light, and in that regard, I'm going to go around the table here for introductions. And after you share your name, a little bit about who you are and what you do, I'd love to hear the book you're reading, the podcast you're listening to, or even the series you might be watching. We'll start to the right with Rachel.
Put her on the spot first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Haley. I'm a senior associate here at Berenzweig Leonard in our government contracts practice. What have I been watching recently? I just finished The Residence on Netflix. It's like a whodunit in the White House, and it is very, very good.
Excellent. So I'm going to pass, and I'll wrap us up at the end. We'll go to Joe.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. Looking forward to our discussion. I'm a senior partner here at the Baldwin Group in Bethesda, Maryland, and I manage the nonprofit vertical for our office inside of the Baldwin Group local office here. Currently, I think that what I'm watching now that's drawing me the most is The Pit, which is on HBO, and if you're an old ER fan, Noah Wiley was
Oh my gosh,
there.
I remember that name, yeah. George Clooney also used to be on there, didn't he?
That's right, that's correct. But Noah now has his own show. It's a hospital show, and it's a very good program so far.
Very cool. So I'm Declan Leonard. I'm Rachel Haley's colleague here at Berenzweig Leonard. Berenzweig Leonard, full-service business law firm here in Tysons. A majority of our client base is people who do business with the government. And I do want to put in one plug before I say what I'm watching for the studio here. I mean, it's not every law firm that's got its own sort of arm that has a studio. Here in Tysons, it's BLC Digital Strategies, and on the other side of the wall that you can't see here is Todd Castleberry, our esteemed producer. So we really appreciate everything he does to put these together. In terms of what I'm watching, it's March. I'm not watching anything on Netflix. I'm watching March Madness, and we got 4 great teams left, so I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome.
And also, I'm winning the firm pool. I think I am, right? So there's another plug,
I'm not sure. I was last.
Yeah, you were. I actually thought you might have forgotten to actually fill yours out, but apparently no.
No, I filled that out with effort.
I can't believe anyone's winning a pool the way it's been going these days.
Yes.
You took mine, too. I'm also watching March Madness. I'm really excited about the guys and the girls
both.
coming up in this Final Four. I'm Glenn Ogilvie. I'm CEO at the Center for Nonprofit Advancement. Really excited to be here. Thank you all for allowing us to use the studio. Many thanks to the Baldwin Group for bringing us forward. These are very trying times. These are important topics, and I'm excited that we have a table of experts to help us get through it. For those of us who are on, I'd love for you to drop into the chat, who you are, the organization you represent, and tell us what you're reading or watching right now as well. It'd be good for folks to see that coming through in an effort to keep it light. But as we get right into it, I'm going to start with you, Declan, because we're here. We're in a space. I'd love for you to sort of back us up and tell us how we got to where we are with the executive orders and the cuts and freezes and pauses.
So it's April 1st. It's April Fool's Day. We wish that this were a topic of an April Fool's joke, but unfortunately it's no joke. It's no joke for the nonprofits that are out there and so many others, both in the DMV and, of course, around the country with these cuts, these indiscriminate cuts that are going on. And they're presenting a lot of challenges. So what we wanted to do today is, talk about information is key. So we wanted to try to set the tone in terms of, where do things stand right now? So let's rewind just a little bit. After the new administration took over, right out of the gate, the first thing really was the executive order. The one that got the most attention was the establishment of DOGE and really streamlining what they would believe to be streamlining government. That started with, of course, a lot of slash in federal spending. And their first target really out of the gate, the most high-profile one, was USAID, which is what a lot of, nonprofits get some of their funding from, through the grants. And so that has immediately taken a toll. USAID, of course, is effectively, I would say, disbanded. I know some of it's been folded into...
It's technically, the federal litigation, the dismantling is stayed, but in practical purposes, for all intents and purposes, it has stopped functioning. I mean, there's very little staff left. They aren't really doing anything except trying to survive.
Yeah, so that was one way of sort of what I would call indirectly impacting nonprofits out there. But then the next act was the administration in late January attempted a federal funding freeze on all grants. I mean, so that was really, really direct. I mean, there was no beating around the bush on that one. That was successfully challenged in court, and so there is no freeze on grants, like technically, but I'm not so sure in effect that that's been the case, and I think probably a lot of people watching today would say the same thing. And so then the next thing that they did relative to nonprofits is the administration issued an executive order, and they called it Reevaluating and Realigning United States Foreign Aid. So that was, more focused on overseas grant work. And I think it's always important to, quote a little bit from these executive orders and then the accompanying memos that come out, because the memo came out and it said advancing U.S. interests when funding NGOs. And so it's important because you've got to know what the administration views of the work, because I think it helps to inform. And what they said was, they accuse nonprofits of engaging in actions that actively undermine the security, prosperity, and safety of the American people. And so that will tell you, where you stand relative to working through this, trying to be patient and resilient as you go through this. This is not anything sort of vague in terms of what is trying to be accomplished here. It's pretty direct. It's pretty blatant.
Mm-hmm. Can we unpack executive order in general? What it means, what it does, and how
great
it can
point.
be.
Yeah, absolutely. So an executive order is an issue that is ordered by the president. It is generally it directs executive agencies to interpret specific guidance a certain way. It can direct agencies to rescind certain regulations or to relook at regulations. Under the Trump administration, it apparently can also stop funding, at least temporarily, until the courts can get involved. But it's essentially just the government directing some part of the executive branch to do something that follows his policy.
And to be fair, this administration has certainly been using executive orders, but they're not new. Every administration comes in and does it. And the reason why they do it is no secret, is it's much easier than trying to push things through Congress. And the biggest challenge that people have against executive orders is, kind of to Rachel's point, when it comes to funding, most of funding is supposed to really be authorized through Congress. And so that's probably the legal challenges. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later on, but that's been sort of the biggest legal challenge. It's like, well, wait a second. We've got 3 co-equal branches of government. We've got Congress who's authorizing these funds, and then they're being frozen based on a piece of paper. So I think that's where a lot of these legal challenges are having some success.
So you have an executive order, it stops, and then through a legal challenge, it can be restarted until the process runs its course. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
I mean, you start off with, it's an interesting process because these are all going to federal courts. These are not going to state courts. They're not going down the street to the Fairfax County Circuit Court. But ironically, a lot of them have been in our area. The Maryland Federal Court was played a big role in the whole DEI aspect. And they have the ability to issue a nationwide injunction. Federal courts are very, very potent and powerful in what they can do. But of course, what happens is it happens at the trial court level, the federal trial court level. Then it goes up to the Court of Appeals, and they go quickly. I mean, Rachel and I deal with cases that go on for years.
Yeah, they've been decided very, very quickly. Everything's been on an expedited basis. Briefing has been incredibly shortened. I mean, some of the cases have gone up to SCOTUS and come back.
They've made it up to the
this
Supreme Court,
point.
yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of litigation happening right now, and it is new updates are happening literally every day.
Thank you for sharing that. So we unpacked USAID. a bit about what's happening there. I know there are other agencies, and I know the team that's on is most concerned about funding. They're funding what can come and
Yeah.
what's being cut. Who else is being cut? What else should we be looking at?
Well, so let's talk about how they're doing it, and then we'll talk about who they're doing it. So originally it was the funding freeze. That was the most direct route. And so now what they're doing is they're doing it more on a project or agency by agency thing. And they're using a phrase that was tucked in at the end of the first Trump administration. They amended one of the regulations, and they basically said that up until then, you could only cancel a grant if it was for cause. Like if you had for cause, which we know in the employment context means you got to have a basis. Here now they can do it, and there's a 5-word famous phrase that's being tucked into every one of these cancellations, which is, it no longer effectuates agency priorities. Okay, that phrase is showing up on a lot of these cancellations. Unfortunately, probably some of the viewers have seen this show up perhaps on some of their stop work orders. No longer effectuates agency priorities, and that just kind of is what it is. I mean, that's the agency's prerogative to do so. There is a legal challenge to that phraseology too. So there's legal challenges everywhere you turn when it comes to this action.
Yeah, and because that phrase is that standard is relatively new, there's just not a lot of case law that has happened and developed for grant terminations in particular. And so there is a lot of uncertainty with challenging terminations. Certainly there are grounds to challenge them. There are a variety of options, and how you challenge it is going to depend on the grant and the agency that you're dealing with. But there is just a lot of uncertainty specifically with that phrase of no longer effectuates agency priorities, because there just hasn't been enough time to litigate what that really means.
Yeah, and then when the work doesn't go away, then you're talking about the purse strings the government controls. And so I believe it was last Thursday or Friday, a new executive order came down, and it basically calls for all payments to contractors and grant holders to go through, be consolidated, because up until now, a lot of that stuff was flowing from agency to agency. In the case of nonprofits, sometimes it would go from federal agency to state government down to the nonprofit. But now it's all going to be consolidated by September of this year at the Department of Treasury. And with that consolidation, we hope we don't see a whole lot of delays in payments, but we certainly are going to see a lot more micromanaging. This stuff's going to be under a microscope. They're going to be looking for additional duplicative efforts, things of that nature. So it's a multi-pronged approach to really shrink the amount of grants that are going out.
And other agencies?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, so in addition to the wholesale funding freeze that was happening, there are some specific policy topics that have also been targeted. So under the Protecting American People Against Invasion executive order that was issued on January 20th, all of the funding related to immigration and refugee resettlement is currently under review and is subject to be terminated if it, again, doesn't align with policy initiatives at this point. Similarly, under the Unleashing American Energy EO, you have a lot of green energy and infrastructure grants that are being terminated. Under NIH, you were similarly, NIH and HHS, you were seeing a ton of grant terminations. You also saw a few weeks ago with NIH attempting to change the caps for research grants to 14% for overhead. That was successfully challenged and has been stayed. But it's really kind of at every agency at this point.
Mm-hmm. You were mentioning something earlier this morning when I saw you in the hallway about student loan forgiveness program and things of that nature. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the definition of public interest has been changed for the student loan forgiveness program. And so now organizations that have been deemed to substantially support illegal activities in terms of immigration, trans healthcare, all sorts of green energy, clean energy organizations are being targeted, and so that their employees are no longer eligible for public service loan forgiveness programs, which is a huge blow to a lot of employees.
Yeah.
So I think this is a good opportunity to do some polling of folks who are on with us, and I do see some questions coming in. Please continue to put those questions into the chat. We'll get to as many of those as we
Yeah,
can
that's a good
before we
one right
wrap
there.
up today. We'd love to do a first poll on your organization size. Please share your organization's budget size as that poll pops up, and then we'll go into a second poll about the number of employees, just to make sure we're speaking directly to the audience that's on.
Glenn, let me ask you a quick question.
Sure.
How are these cuts right now affecting nonprofits directly? I know you're in the trenches every day talking to the C-level suite of our big nonprofits, and even the littler ones as well too. But what are you seeing there?
So it's interesting, and thank you for that, Joe. Rachel just mentioned that you have these orders, and then there's a freeze or a legal challenge, and then it's stayed. We've seen organizations have funds frozen, although it's been rescinded. They still don't have their dollars. They don't have their reimbursements, or they don't have their direct funding. So that's a huge impact on organizations and their ability to go forward. We've also seen challenges with immigration coming to organizations and challenging the very people that they serve. So that too is difficult. You name it, but for organizations to lose, in some cases, 20, 30% of their funds overnight, it really challenges everything from payroll to their ability to do the great work that they do. So we're seeing that a great deal. Great question.
Yeah, delay is the enemy here. I mean, you could say, well, we still have funding, but if you're not getting paid for your reimbursements, if you're not receiving your grant recipient, funding, that's effectively just, killing the agency anyway. So,
Yep. So interesting on these legal challenges, and we do see that we've got some information back on our polling.
Oh, wow.
Good percentages here, 1 to 3 million, and then 7 million and above. So good diversity for who's on. No matter the size of an organization's budget, you lose 30, 40%. You've got a big reimbursement out there of your own funds that you paid in advance for programming that you're now looking to be reimbursed. That doesn't show up. It creates great problems internally. So really, really good to know who's in the room. We'll see the number of employees in just a second. I want to unpack some of the acronyms that are floating around and the way that they might be defined. It was also a question in the chat. One is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion as we know it. What is the administration definition?
Rachel,
purposes of
I'm
the
waiting
legal
to
battle.
find that one.
That's a really great question, and it's not entirely clear. So I guess about 10 days ago, the government put out some guidance, the EEOC
And DOJ,
and the
yeah.
DOJ put out some guidance about what they meant by DEI, and while it was somewhat enlightening, it's still not entirely clear. But essentially, it's most likely going to be that any sort of discrimination, it's not just minorities that are just being discriminated against, but discrimination is possible against anybody. And so DEI advancing any class of person over a different class of person seems to fit as DEI under this administration's definition, but it's still kind of cloudy what that means.
Yeah, I mean, the way I've explained it is this. I mean, this administration, and again, you can agree with it or don't agree with it, but the important thing is you have to understand it, because this is, for the next couple of years at least, the environment that companies have to operate in. So I think it's important for them to understand this administration thinks that any leg up that you give to any employee based on a protected classification, whether that's gender, race, national origin, anything, they believe that that by definition is discrimination, because inevitably you are then holding somebody else back by doing that. So they believe that it doesn't matter if you're in the majority, if you're in the minority, none of that stuff should matter. Everyone should have an absolutely level playing field.
And legal action in that regard? What have you all seen?
Oh, I mean, it's been challenged. It's been challenged left and right. In fact, most recently. So let's rewind just a second. So for DEI, it's probably the one that will have, well, the funding impact is the most devastating. DEI is probably the next area of the administration's efforts that will have an impact on nonprofits, because what it is it's easy to sort of dismiss, talk about DEI. That's culture war stuff. Does that really matter? Well, what's happening is this. What the administration has said is that as a condition of getting payment, you have to certify that you do not engage in illegal DEI. That was the question that was being asked here. What's the definite DEI? Kind of I know it when I see it, I guess, is really what you have to deal with in this particular case. But these nonprofits, they may already have seen them. Some of the folks that are listening today may have seen them. I know a lot of my government contracts clients have already had to see them. I have already seen them and had to sign them. They say, we do not engage as an organization in any illegal DEI, and if you are found to have said that as a lie, basically, you're subject to the Federal False Claims Act, which is both criminal and civil liability. Now, that's been subject to some litigation in terms of whether the certifications, and Rachel's always better at these things than I am,
Yes. So the most updated status on the litigation for the certification requirements in particular is the Fourth Circuit overturned the stay that was in place preventing the certification recently, so that the government can start asking and requiring certifications of no DEI tomorrow if they wanted to. That said, there is a new ruling specifically with respect to the Department of Labor, where the Department of Labor cannot request these certifications yet. That came, I believe it was a Minnesota district court.
Illinois.
Illinois?
Yeah.
Illinois district court on Friday.
Yeah, it was just Friday, so it's very late breaking and
Yes.
specifically relating to nonprofits.
Yes, but only in the Department of Labor. It does not apply to every agency. It's just limited to the Department of Labor.
Yeah, so if you're getting grants from Department of Labor and they're sending you a certification to say you do not engage in illegal DEI, as of right now, because of this court ruling, you do not have to fill out that certification. Again, it was nationwide, but only as to one particular agency, which is a little bit interesting. I don't know why they did just one, because it really permeates all these different agencies, but we'll see. There's lots of other challenges that are sitting out there, so definitely.
And kind of along those lines, just because the Fourth Circuit stayed the injunction out of Maryland, it is just pending appeal. That doesn't mean that it ultimately will be allowed to be enacted once that appeal fully resolves itself. It's just the underlying preliminary injunction that was ordered by the district court was stayed until a final decision is made there.
I love this audience because I do these quite often, and sometimes it's crickets. We're getting a lot of stuff. Rachel,
Good activity coming
Rachel
in there.
Goodnight on the other side of this wall is typing these questions as they're coming in, and her arms are getting tired. But go ahead. Let's.
Thank you, Rachel. Fast and furious there. So back to the number of employees. Thank you, everyone, for responding to that. We do see we have a great deal of employees or employers with over 35% of their team, 35% of this group here having more than 50 employees on board. We've got the employee guy here next to us, Joe Appa, who knows a thing or two about organizations having 50 or more employees. Joe, you've been doing this work for a long time. There have been some crises moments leading up to this one, nothing like this, of course. What have you seen adjustment-wise with groups with 50 or more employees in times of crisis, funding cuts and things of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, this is, and I go back a long way, as you said, like to say, Glenn. But
No.
I'm older than everybody here.
Go back like car seats.
I go back to car seats, yeah. But what it is we've been seeing a lot of people are scrambling. What makes this one different than other times in the past where we've had to scramble is people kind of knew what was coming at them. Right now, organizations don't really know what's coming at them because, as Declan and Rachel were saying, they're literally taking things changed by the day, sometimes by the hour, so they're not sure how to react to some of this. So we're working with a lot of nonprofits right now and helping them as far as what we can do and cutting overhead down and cutting costs down. And there's always the three big costs. There's always your your facilities costs, there's your payroll costs, that's typically the biggest one, and then your third one is benefits behind that. So we're working with employers to try to figure out at least with one of those costs right now and helping them trim costs on their third biggest cost, which is usually their benefits. And we've been able to do that and maybe save a little bit of overhead there so that they can spend that money towards other issues as they come up concerning the changes that are occurring in the environment today.
Awesome. We're going to talk more about that when we get to some strategy, some tips.
These
Jumping
are good,
right in.
These are
Declan.
good questions.
Declan's chomping at the bit.
I like them.
Let's go.
Yeah.
So I think we touched on illegal DEI, right? Did we
Yeah,
cover
but
that?
it's a good question. I mean, the way they've worded this is interesting. So we got a question that basically says, look, if we're submitting our invoices for programs that don't relate directly to DEI, they're not training in the DEI aspect, or they're not engaging in DEI activities as part of their work, as part of the program, but that the organization itself has a DEI mission internally. They've got policies and procedures that embrace DEI. How could that impact funding in the organization as a whole? I think it's a great question, because sometimes I think people do make the mistake that, hey, we're not doing any of that. We're doing clean water in name a place. But internally, if we have a DEI program, like we talked about before, unless you're Department of Labor, you're going to have to fill out a certification as a condition to getting paid that says, I do not engage in any internal DEI, illegal DEI. I see another question there about what is illegal DEI. I think we hit on that before, which is, it's what the administration believes it to be. Glenn, if you want to hit that middle question, I really think that that's a good one too.
Yeah, so this is interesting, and it talks about federal law, the fact that it protects certain classes of people, race, ethnicity, and gender, and then looking at that and trying to understand how that can be wiped away. Pretty interesting question, also with a thought. What are you all thinking about that in response?
Yeah, I mean, so here's what the administration would say, and again, you don't have to agree. You can agree or you don't have to. It's just important to understand their mindset. They don't believe that they're doing anything related to wiping away unlawful discrimination. They think that if you take race into account and they say that is white male, black male, female, anything, they believe if you take that into account when you make an employment decision, you are inevitably engaging in discrimination. So they would say we're not wiping away any discrimination. The discrimination laws, such as Title VII, that have been on the books for decades now, they're not doing anything to change those. They just, the key phrase is affirmative action. They do not believe that you should affirmatively look at these protected characteristics and use them to give a preference to one employee over the other.
So how do we move through this? We have had some conversation around DEI audits and other things that organizations might do. What do you all recommend? What have you done?
Yeah, you want to jump in there, like in terms of what we're telling our clients?
Yeah, first and foremost, to do an HR review of all of your HR documents, all of your websites, all of your job postings, anything like that, to look at what language you were using there and to tweak that language to be more in line with what the certification is requiring and what this administration is how they are defining illegal DEI.
Yeah, one phrase that I've encouraged clients to really embrace is equal opportunity employer. EEO, we've heard that for how many years now. People put those in their postings. We're an equal opportunity employer. That is still very much not only safe, but very much embraced by the current administration, because they view that as everybody gets exactly the same chance within the workplace. So affirmative action, affirmative steps, balancing the workplace, those are bad under this current administration. They don't like those buzzwords. They don't like those phrases. But equal opportunity employer, you can very much embrace. I've suggested to clients that, look, you're not going to scrub every aspect. If you have been robust in your DEI initiatives in the past, you're not going to, somebody's going to find an old version of your handbook, an old version of your website, just something.
Social media?
Yeah, social media, LinkedIn postings, all of that stuff. And so I've encouraged them to prepare an internal memo, not for dissemination with the staff, but an internal memo that they can that the highest levels of the organization sets forth what it is that they believe, and really embracing equal employment opportunity. Staying away from some of these other aspects that are not in favor with the current administration, so that if the government comes knocking, if somebody tries to challenge you on one of these certifications, you can pull out this memo and say, look, I don't know what was done in the past was done in the past. By the way, what was done in the past, in large respect, was mandated by the government because the OFCCP required them to do affirmative action programs. So now you're kind of like caught between a rock and a hard place. So I've encouraged them to do a memo that they can submit to the government and say, here's what we believe. You might have this stray document, you might have this stray document, but let's put it all here, So I think that could be helpful.
It's really interesting, and I'd love to talk a little more about that. So you're saying equal opportunity, which was and still is agreeable under the law, instead of scrubbing your website, your social media, and other channels. That's been a really big question in our community.
Yeah, I would probably do both. I guess what I was pointing out is the challenge in truly scrubbing.
It's not
because and all, by the way, all it takes is a disgruntled employee.
Oh, wow.
To take an old version of your handbook and send it to, there's hotlines going on right now of DEI hotlines where you can, and this is where a disgruntled employee can really turn into like a whistleblower.
Would you recommend then, like you memorialize what you're doing going forward, so that you can say this is what it used to be, but following executive orders now, we're moving in this direction here, and we have proof that we're doing.
Yeah, and it's almost like people love to see things in writing, and so it's almost like you're trying to explain stuff, and people are throwing documents in your face. This would be it reminds me of during COVID when people were applying for PPP loans. That was a snapshot in time, and so I did encourage companies that we were representing to prepare a memo to say, why do you have economic uncertainty at this particular time? Because 2 years from now, you may have rebounded and you're never going to be able to recreate that environment. So one piece of paper that I think would be very potent if the government comes knocking on this.
That's very interesting. So obviously organizations are very nervous. Everyone is being very careful. Can you talk a little bit more about things that are happening, foundations, private donors that you all have seen, and things that organizations are doing to get through or completely communicate?
Yeah, and
their
I'd be
message?
interested. I mean, you all, you have boots on the ground with your members and everything, so I'm really interested in that. I mean, obviously everybody is very spooked right now. I mean, even a lot of our federal contractors, the agency contracting offices are spooked. They don't want to run afoul of the administration. So I think that's flowing down. You're probably, Glenn, seeing this with a lot of your members, whether it's foundations that are funding sources, whether it's individual donors. I can imagine everybody right now, we're 60 days into the administration. I mean, people are still trying to figure out, where do I stand and where am I not going to cross the line and end up on the bad side of, a tweet or something,
Yeah, it's a really tough time. I mean, we are tax-exempt entities, most of us 501c3. Being tax-exempt through the IRS is a process, federal entity. Organizations are afraid that they will be attacked, whether it be for their DEI or some other service points that they're bringing forward. But foundations, funders, those who provide grants to our organizations are also challenged and unknowing about where to go and what to do next. But it's really compelling, this notion, because it's been spiraling for a while. Folks are trying to undo what they did, said, wrote on their website. And the question was, is it really gone? And I think you all have answered that it's not. It's not scrubbable, as Rachel giggles. It's still going to be there.
Yeah.
So,
Glenn, I never thought I would be advising a client. I spent an hour on a phone call this about 2 weeks ago on pronouns. Like, do you have to, the federal government has ordered federal employees to remove pronouns from their email signature block, okay? That did not necessarily flow directly down to contractors, grant recipients. But, if you are interfacing and communicating with them, and you have pronouns in your signature block, you know that they're not allowed to have them, and yet you're asking for money and you're asking for programs. So it puts you in a bit of a conundrum.
I really appreciate that. So we do have some more questions coming in from the group on here.
I was going to ask you a question, quick question, Glenn. I know it relates to one of the questions coming in on the board. Have you heard of any the organizations that we work with on a day-to-day basis getting their tax exemption threatened by any of this because of orders, DEI, et cetera?
So that hasn't happened yet, but it's something that everyone is bracing for, because the way to really challenge an organization, the first is to cut large percentages of funding. The second is to challenge their tax exemption. We know when someone indicates or there's a thought that you are operating outside of your charitable purpose, it triggers an audit, which is time consuming and takes time away from program administrative as well as operations. So everyone is bracing for that and thinking that one thing could trigger the other. So being really careful there. So good questions. I see this one here. Since Chevron was overturned, how much a difference would the courts give? How much deference would the courts give to the admin's executive order when analyzing cases under Title?
We've got a lawyer in the
7.
audience there. That's a
happening?
very well written question. That is like, that is. I feel like I'm in law school class and I'm about to cower behind the person in front of me. Like, don't call on me.
You
don't
go.
call
You
on
go.
me.
No, you go.
I go to Texaco. I didn't go to Chevron. I don't know what you're talking about.
I think this might have actually been a law school exam question that I had.
All right. Well, here's your second chance to get it right, Rachel. Come on.
They should be given no deference or very little deference. Under Loper-Bright, which is the Supreme Court case that overturned the Chevron case and Chevron deference, courts have the right and authority to decide what statutes say, and there is no discretion given to underlying agency interpretations of that. It'll be very interesting to see how that plays out with respect to these regulatory changes in particular, because Loper-Bright has been such a pet project of the conservative legal movement for decades at this point. And so having the conservative legal movement really be the impetus behind overturning Chevron, and then perhaps that not working out in their favor under this administration is an interesting turn of events.
Yeah, no, I think it really is a great question, and it's interesting that Chevron was overturned prior to this administration. And to see now where we stand with the current administration, and again, it's always important for me to kind of dumb it down for my own brain in terms of this. Chevron is this thought process that, like, Congress passes the laws, the executive administers, implements the laws, and what had happened over the years under this Chevron doctrine is that the executive branch had gotten really powerful because Congress can't pass anything because nobody can agree on anything nowadays. So they would pass like a bare bones thing, basically saying, hey, the law says you should do X, and it really had no guidance whatsoever. The executive branch, through its agencies, would implement these regulations that effectively engaged in lawmaking. You know, they basically said, look, you're basically taking over Congress's job. And so what the Supreme Court came in and said, no. Congress needs to do its job. You implement, you execute. And I think the reason why I say it's very topical right now is Congress is really suffering from a lot of inaction. I mean, in fact, they're kind of missing in action right now. And the executive branch is flexing power more than ever. So I do think the courts probably will implement this decision to rein in some of this stuff. So I think it's a very, very timely question.
Very interesting. Great question. Let's go to this indirect cost question here. That's a big deal for our organizations. And the question is whether or not the limits on indirect cost recovery at NIH. So we're bringing up all these things that we're seeing and wondering if they're going to have an impact on nonprofit organizations. But will that mandate also impact nonprofit organizations?
My GovCon colleague over there.
Yeah. Right now, we don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if the agencies attempt to impose these indirect cost recovery caps unilaterally on grant recipients, kind of across the board. There hasn't been a big push for that. There hasn't been an executive order about it. The NIH cap was an NIH agency action, and so we have not seen that widespread yet. But I would not be surprised if we do, especially with the administration's emphasis on cutting costs and really reducing every amount of funding that they can.
Yeah, especially with the consolidation of payments over to Department of Treasury. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we're not going to spend any more time on the tax exempt
Yeah.
status because we don't want to throw anything out there that.
These are
throws
great
a
questions,
curveball.
by the way. Keep them coming.
Yeah, I like this one here, and it really speaks to some other questions we've had in the nonprofit sector. So if a funded program specifically is set up to fund a class of people, Opportunity Youth, for example, does this run afoul of DEI mandates? And I say that because many of our organizations have a certain class or race in their name.
Yeah, yeah. But if the government is not cutting that, that's on them, in my opinion. Like, in other words, so if they're still funding this Opportunity Youth, like, that's not you necessarily engaging in DEI. That's you in collaboration with a program that was not cut. I mean, I think we have to assume, given what do we call it, the chainsaw approach that's been happening so far, that if the government keeps a particular program that they're funding through a grant in operation, I would be pretty comfortable as a nonprofit saying, I'm going to continue to do the work if the government has decided that it is going to fund that work.
So I'm finding it hard to realize that you all are having to keep up with all of this stuff on a day-to-day. How are you keeping up? What are you looking at? And how are you keeping us all together to know what's coming down and what's occurred?
We have a Rachel and an Olivia that help us. No, I mean, really, it really is a group effort. I mean, I said at the very beginning of this, information is key. I think for the folks that signed up to listen to this, hopefully you're getting information. You're able to sort of separate what's really the fact from the noise. We have to do that here internally, too. We do a lot of these. We're lucky to have this BLC Digital Strategy Studio here with Todd Castleberry, and we do a lot of these events. But you're right, it's on a daily basis. I did, when I was preparing the outline for this one, I had talked about the certifications, not realizing that Illinois court had stopped the certification for the Department of Labor. So, please forgive us if anything you hear here happens to be changed tomorrow or even later on this afternoon. We're doing the best we can to get the information as quickly as we can out to you.
Incredible. Well, I know we have more questions coming in. I do want to do another poll for the audience, and I'd like to understand the percentage of funding we're receiving from the federal government, either directly or indirectly. Love to see what people have to share on that. So please drop into that polling question the percentage of funding you're receiving from the federal government, either directly or indirectly. So we want to talk about some tactical steps. We kind of segued there a little bit on keeping up with the information. We know that we'll be following you all around and repopulating whatever you share so that folks can stay ahead of it. What other tips and strategies would you give us as organizations to be well during this challenging time?
One of the biggest issues, and I'll be interested to hear from Joe on this one, is if you do suffer workforce reductions, whether you have to go through a furlough versus a layoff, like what are the considerations that you're hearing from the nonprofits in terms of, can I keep people on health insurance? Do I not have them on health? All of those benefits related issues that I think are considerations that you're probably seeing a lot.
Yeah, I mean, typically what we're finding is when an agency closes, they basically lay off everybody, or they lay off. It could be that they're not closing the entire program, but certain programs. They're going to go ahead and just tell those people right now, sorry, but we can't fund you anymore, and you'll have to file for unemployment. As far as their benefits go, they can stay on COBRA. So if they have benefits, they like them or they need them and want to keep them, they can do that, but they will be expected to pay for the cost of those benefits themselves, and they'll get up to 18 months, depending on the state, location, things like that. That they can keep the benefits. In some cases, it's even more that they can do that. So that's where we're finding, and we're helping a lot of our employer groups when those things happen, reach out to the employees, work with them, make sure the employees are okay. A big thing that we have that we're working with now too is a lot of the employees are using the Employee Assistance Program for help.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
So
EAPs,
EAPs are helping not only help manage stress, help manage. Some cases they help them meet up with financial counselors to help them manage their budgets. This is all new for a lot of people, and just kind of being summarily dismissed is not an easy thing for anybody. So there's a lot of stressors now involved in a person's life that they didn't necessarily have before. So the EAP is an important thing that we have, and we make sure that the EAP will continue to work with those employees even after they've been released from their current place of employment.
Some of our clients are hoping rather than to do an absolute layoff right from the get-go, are doing what's called a furlough, and we've heard furloughs over the years. I mean, to me, I've always remembered furloughs when we have like government shutdowns or threatened government shutdowns. So it's rare to see them come into play, but they are. And basically what they are is more of a temporary layoff. And a lot of times they try to keep them, not even on COBRA, they try to keep them on their health insurance during the period of time. Now, as Joe, who's the expert in this field of benefits and insurance, as you know, the plan will only give you so much leeway before you have to kind of, unfortunately cut off those benefits.
Correct. That's correct. And you get a certain amount of leeway, and then they're going to tell you you can't keep them on the plan anymore because they're no longer qualified as being a group member. So that's one of the things that we're dealing with insurance companies. A lot of times we can actually get exceptions made if there's things going on, and the insurance carrier will allow us to bend the rules a little bit around that kind of thing. So that has been working well. Furloughs are being considered right now. As of now, I've seen just basically terminations, but what I'm hoping is that people are going to be hired back again once they get a little bit of this straightened out.
So furloughs versus layoffs. You get furloughed for a few weeks, or maybe a few months, and then you get brought back on. Do you get your salary that you missed, or no?
The short answer is no, not legally, but voluntarily you can.
Okay.
So furloughs are really just a creature of whatever the company decides it can afford. I mean, it's almost like a budgetary issue. You don't have to. I mean, a furlough really is a fancy name for kind of a temporary layoff. It's a way to kind of keep tethered to employees. You don't want this brain drain. You don't want to lose like a lot of your employees. And so a furlough is kind of a nicer way to say it. But you can allow them to use PTO. Now, again, we sometimes advise, well, wait a sec, aren't you in a cost, cutting and cost preserving, dollar preserving mode? Why would you let people use their PTO during that period of time? So the short answer is, I mean, if you want to give them back pay, you can, but you're not required to now.
Very interesting. So a couple more things, and the furloughs are super helpful, looking at those versus layoffs. What else are we doing internally? I mean, at the center, we're telling organizations to do a full assessment, a top-to-bottom review of all of their revenue that's coming in, know which revenue is coming from the federal government or which is a direct pass-through. As my mother used to say, or always says, plan for the worst and hope for the best. So in scenario planning, which we're also supporting organizations to do, what would we do in the scenario in which we lose this particular grant, which supports 25% of our revenues? So looking at that scenario planning is another thing. And then having the conversations with our funders. A lot of our funders are providing grant awards to us. We're in the midst of those, asking about renewing that funding, automatic, so we're not having to do another proposal. Looking for multi-year funding, having that conversation, and if funders, these are grant funds now, are being, if you're receiving those dollars in disbursements, 50% and another 50, looking to get it all up front. So I think everyone's watching the news. Having the conversation is super helpful, but we always lean on our individual donor pool. Individual donors can write a check whenever they want for however much they can afford, but they all see what's happening. So getting into the space.
I think that'll be perhaps one silver lining. It's hard to see it right now while we're in the midst of it and still only 60 days in. I think what it will do for nonprofits out there, for companies out there, it will cause them to be more resilient. I think there had been a tendency perhaps over the last decade or two where doing work where you're funded by the federal government, became kind of the sure thing. I know coming out of COVID, a lot of private equity were looking at government contractors and saying, wow, they're the only ones that are thriving during this period of time, during COVID when everything else was shutting down. So I think it will cause nonprofits to really look at, as you say, their funding sources and perhaps diversify those a bit and not put all their eggs in one basket so that if this happens, they're able to perhaps weather the storm and come out the other side.
Sure.
And do a financial checkup like Glenn said. That's really where we're seeing nonprofits need help, because sometimes things have been in place a long time and maybe it's not necessary anymore. And we've been working with a lot of our nonprofit clients as well to helping them do financial checkups on that side as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they're asking for, we talk about HR audits or DEI audits. I bet you on a benefit side, like where, Joe, can, I'm sure your nonprofits are saying, where can we save a little bit of money so that maybe
Yes.
we eke out another 6 months or 9 months, and maybe when the dust settles. And I know there's
Yeah.
probably a lot of strategies you've been talking about with them.
A lot more medical budgeting, how much employee pays versus an employer pays. And sometimes we're shifting the cost a little bit more to the employee. We're trying to not do that, but that happens a little bit because, every dollar we can save could save their job.
Yeah. Here's a question I have for you. Are you able to change, like, let's just say for these unforeseen circumstances, let's say you have a nonprofit that up until now has been humming along, doing great work, and bringing in the grant money. They've got great benefits through, your work with Baldwin. If now they can't perhaps afford a really nice health insurance, are you allowed before the period ends or whatever you call the anniversary date or something? Are you allowed to change that based on these unforeseen economic circumstances?
Great question.
Maybe go to like a much higher deductible, just something, a stopgap just until.
Yes, yeah, and that is possible. There may be some resets on the contract. That technically, when a group renews its benefits, it does it for a 12-month period.
Yeah.
That means it can't be changed by the insurer, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the insuree, the person that has the benefits, can't change it. So the organization in this case. So we can go back and ask the insurance companies for different plan designs and things like that to help them make it through the rough spot here. They could reset some of their reset dates on deductibles and things like that, but those are kind of smaller problems. The bigger problem being, let's see what we can do to keep everybody employed here. So
I think
that is
that's
one of the
strategy.
strategies that can be implemented if need be.
So we got another question coming in here, and then first, quickly on the polling with regard to the percentage of funding, federal, 38% of the group sees 5 to 10% of their funding coming from the federal government, and on the high side, 26% of the group recognizes that more than 50% of their dollars are coming in from the federal
Wow.
government,
Yeah.
either directly or indirectly. That's tremendous, and I'm glad we're talking about these steps and tips and strategies to kind of bring things into alignment. What are we missing? And we talked a little bit about leveraging consultants and contractors. What other skills or strategies can we use to get through this trying time?
I think teaming agreements is a good opportunity for nonprofits to work together and to compete for these grant opportunities that they maybe don't have the ability to do on their own anymore because of these other funding cuts. You see teaming agreements a ton in the government contract space, and they are truly really incredible tools for contractors to work together and produce really competitive proposals. And so I think using that same mechanism in the nonprofit space for grant recipients is a really big opportunity here to try to weather the storm a little bit better.
Yeah, workforces are being impacted. I mean, let's face it. We're looking at those numbers there, but all of those, everyone listening is impacted in some way or another in terms of federal funding, which means, unfortunately, that results in a decrease in their workforce. And so, Rachel, it's a great point. If you can bind together during this period of time and engage in teaming agreements to still get the work done, still stay in the game, still stay relevant, and hopefully this too shall pass type thing.
I like that a lot, the teaming agreements, the collaboration, the working together, raising money together.
Yeah.
During the Great Recession, we had the 3 C's, conserve, cut costs where you could, collaborate, which was the other C, and the third C was, instead of the one in the question here, it was consolidate versus merge. No one wanted to hear that. It got everyone's sort of pressure up. But the question is about merging and organizations coming together, and I see it here, whether or not we've considered a webinar on how to merge. Very interesting. Have you all seen that in your practice? Have organizations come together?
No, I see. I mean, certainly we have in the regular contracting realm, but for nonprofits, I think it's the exception to the norm. But the question: have you considered developing a webinar on how to merge? Rachel and Olivia, are you listening? Listen, we're committed to getting information out there. So if Glenn and Joe want to get back in here, we're in here definitely to do that. We know we can't cover every topic, and it says on it.
Yeah, and I can tell you this. being in the nonprofit industry for the last 25, 30 years, I've sat on many, many boards, probably half a dozen or more. And I was actually on 2 organizations that merged. I was on the board of an organization that merged with a larger one at the time. So
Yeah.
I actually have some experience in it, and it is quite a bit of work, but it was very rewarding, and we were able to actually pick up a smaller organization and put it into a larger one. As one of the board members, we brought them in, the smaller organization in, and it actually saved that particular organization from going out of business completely.
Yeah, I mean, I still get back to the fact, maybe it's a little bit of a glass half full approach, but I still get back to the fact that, there's a lot of slashing and chainsawing of funding and stuff, but I don't believe that the function for most of this stuff goes away. I think that's the perhaps a bit of hope that's there. I don't believe that I think that this is very much a, as they say, a chainsaw approach, but once they start to realize what some of these programs did, I feel like they're going to come back.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to go away, and I feel like they're going to come back more than ever in the private sector. I think perhaps the federal government, I think this administration in particular, doesn't like the fact that employees are not at will, meaning they have special protections. Well, that is an opportunity. I feel bad. My wife is a federal employee. But that is an opportunity for the private sector, which is mostly at-will employment. I would think that this administration would embrace moving a lot of this money and moving a lot of these functions to the private sector through nonprofits, government contractors, whatever you have.
It's interesting. We are encouraging all of our nonprofits to document the workload, the level of effort. You cut half of your workforce and the work is still getting done. If it's not documented that people are working late at night and early in the morning,
Yeah.
the assumption is you didn't need all of those people anyway.
Yeah.
So encouraging people to document. But there are some shining lights in this. Joe, I know you're familiar with some grant funding that's been earmarked or provided for folks relative to benefits. I'd love for you to share a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, what we have is we've been able to work with, again, some of our nonprofits, and we're able to get some money for them that go towards reducing the cost of maybe maintaining their health insurance program for their employees. So that's been working out really well and saving some of these groups from laying off some of the employees that they might have otherwise had to do so. So that was part of what we're doing, and we still have some programming money available. If anyone wants to talk to us, we're available to do that, and we'd love to talk to you about it as well too. But working with Glenn and the center, we've been able to uncover some money that we'll be able to put towards that kind of thing.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
I would say don't put your head in the sand. There are these resources out there. So, for instance, we talked about furlough before. Even though you're still technically considered an employee during a furlough, you might be getting health insurance, you might be getting PTO, whatever. You're usually not drawing a paycheck. You are eligible to apply for unemployment, even though you're still on furlough. And even if you're doing even part-time work, you are eligible for what they call underemployment. So employers, nonprofits, you need to be able to communicate to your employees that you have these outside resources there. You hope that it's a stopgap. You hope it's temporary. But that is something they should be applying for unemployment, and they should be looking at all of these things, as Joe mentioned, potentially assistance on the insurance side of things. There's lots of help out there to get through this tough time.
That's
Yeah,
good.
and to the HR directors listening out there, please let your employees know that they should take advantage of the Employee Assistance Program. There's a lot of things you can get through the Employee Assistance Program as far as help, not only for your health, of course, meaning, if you're getting stressed and you need counseling, whatever, that's been a big use of it. But they also have coaches on staff to help you get back into the employment game, getting you re-employed, meeting up with you, doing resumes, things like that. There's a lot of different types of assistance out there that an EAP can give you, not just typically mental health, which is what most of us think of when we think of EAP.
I'm really glad that we are underscoring health and wellness so much. There's a lot of stress going on, affecting and impacting people, and just watching it every day, whether it's impacting you directly or not, it has an impact on just your overall feelings. I will say that communicate. Organizations are sometimes ashamed and fearful of saying they need help, especially our larger organizations. funds. But folks are listening. There are new funders who are coming to the table. We've gotten now maybe 3 calls, some as far as California, with folks who have good sums of money who are asking us, who should we donate these funds to?
Interesting.
These are new people who see what's happening, who are wanting to support. So if you're not telling your story, it won't be heard.
I think it's also important to remember that there are options to challenge any sort of grant termination or stop work order. It is very grant dependent, and it's going to be agency dependent. But read your grant documents, read the applicable agency regulations. There are avenues for challenging these terminations, and do it. Challenge them. The government at this point, a lot of the cuts are happening wholesale without any individualized assessments, and that courts don't like that in general. And so if you have the means, by all means, challenge the terminations and explore all of your legal options there.
Time is on your side. I mean, legal challenges can sometimes preserve the status quo for a long period of time. We talked about how quick these things are making their way through the courts, but I think a lot of these other ones might take months and perhaps a year or two. And, administrations are not real long. And so I do think time is the friend of a lot of these nonprofits. So I do agree. I mean, don't think that a legal challenge is futile. Even if you don't win it, ultimately, if you have preserved another 6 to 9 to 12 months, that could be the difference, because by then, who knows where we're going to be in 12 months? I mean, we're 60 days in. I don't think anyone predicted this environment. So, yeah. So I think we're probably
Well, final
wrapping up.
seconds as we close things out. I think we all gave some wrap up. Any final words from one word from each of us? Final words.
Hope.
All right.
Reach out to us. We'll help you.
Tenacity.
Challenge.
All right. Well, thank you all. This was great. Good information. We'll be following up with you all and posting things to the site, keeping the audience engaged, and look forward to another one in the near term. Take care, everybody. Be well.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.